Our story begins with a student named Teiki Yagashi being woken up by his sister for school. At that time, a girl named Yu Kiriyama wakes up as well, but wonders to herself it wasn't a dream. Meanwhile, a student named Aori Nagaze receives a hot drink from her mother. Though it ends up burning her mouth, she, smiling, says that it's fine. Another student named Aoki Yoshifumi texts Yu, asking her if it was a dream. And lastly, a student named Inaba Himeko heads out to school, not before giving the cold shoulder to her brother, which makes him say that she'll never get a boyfriend like that. On the way to school, Iori ends up running into Teichi, and then into Inaba, Yu, and Aoki, and then enter the school together. Later, Teichi explains that at Yamaboshi Academy, the school they attend, every student is required to join a club, but since Aoki, and Yu joined clubs that were either non-existent or had closed down, and the fact that Iori let her teacher choose a club for her, and that Inaba got into a fight with the president of the computer club, they all joined together to form the Student Cultural Society, or STUCS for short. After that, he's now in the STUCS room with Iori and Inaba discussing about what paper they will publish. Yu and Aoki then arrive, but as they're behaving oddly, Iori asks them what's wrong. So Aoki ends up forcibly revealing that last night he and Yu switched bodies. Though he's then teased by saying that it was only a dream due to him getting rejected by Yu too many times, he explains that he woke up in the middle of the night and found himself in an unfamiliar room. And upon looking in a mirror, he saw Yu's face, which made him panic, but right after that, he switched bodies back. Yu says that the same happened to her, though she then tries to claim that it wasn't real and that it's just one of Aoki's creepy fantasies. After that, Iori says that she left her notebook in the classroom and goes off to get it. Then Teichi says that he's going to make tea, but right at that moment, he blinks and finds himself in a classroom now. But he then notices that his voice changed, that he has a skirt, and then touches his chest, realizing that he has boobs now. But then a student named Fujishima Meiko sees this and asks Iori, what's she doing, confusing Teichi. But Fujishima then asks if she wants help in fondling them. Teichi tries to get away, but Fujishima holds him, but then someone in Teichi's body arrives and tries to drag Iori away, and after wrestling with Fujishima for a bit, they manage to escape. After escaping, the person in Teichi's body explains that she's Iori, saying that she suddenly was back in the club room after looking for her notebook. So she ran away after everyone began to call her Teichi. Teichi then realizes that Aoki and Yu were telling the truth. Back in the club room, they explain to their friends that they switched bodies as well. Inaba, though, having doubts, tells Teichi that he'll ask him something only Teichi knows, and that she expects a quick answer. Teichi agrees, so she quickly asks him what's the title of the last adult film he borrowed from Aoki, which makes him quickly say Big Jug High School Jai, but stops himself midway, saying that she doesn't even know the answer to that question. Inaba, though, says that Aoki can verify that answer, and he does, saying that it's correct. She then tells Iori something in the ear, which leaves her shocked, but makes Inaba realize that they've actually switched bodies. Teichi then asks Aoki and Yu how long did the body swap last for them, so Aoki says 30 or 40 minutes, but right at that moment, Teichi and Iori switch bodies back, saying that they're back to normal. They later leave the school and talk about what happened, with Inaba wondering if it's a one-day phenomenon or something that happens to the four of them. And Iori says that they shouldn't mention this to anyone else, but Teichi says that he doubts anyone would believe them. They all later return to their homes with Teichi, who ran into his little sister, inviting her ice cream. Teichi runs into Iori, but first they make sure they haven't swapped bodies. But then Yu, Aoki, and Inaba appear in a rush and drag them somewhere else, where they explain that the three of them have switched bodies with each other, with Yu being in Aoki's body, Aoki in Inaba's body, and Inaba in Yu's body. Later in the club room, Yu complains about the situation and Aoki tells Teichi and Iori to go to class, but right after that, they switch back to their original bodies. A bit later, Teichi, Iori, and Inaba meet up with Mr. Godo, a teacher and advisor of the Cultural Research Club who has an easygoing personality and tries to be cool with the students. He asks them why didn't they all show up until third period to class, so Inaba lies by saying that they all had upset stomachs due to rotten chocolate they ate yesterday. He says he'll buy her story and lets them go. They later commend Inaba for lying that easily, and then Teichi wonders if Aoki and Yu got out of this okay as well, but right at that moment he switches bodies with Yua, who was having lunch with her friends, so he decides to rush to the bathroom so he can be alone. At first he gets into the men's bathroom, but upon realizing he shouldn't do this, he enters the women's one. He then calls Inaba and verifies that Yu has switched bodies with him as well, but he then suddenly switches back to his original body, but with Yu asking Inaba on the phone why did Teichi take her body to the bathroom. Later, in class, Teichi sees Iori talking with Fujishima. Later, he goes to the club room but encounters Shiori. who demands to know what happened between him and Fujishima when they switched bodies. She then cries, saying that he played with her, but he says that he had to do that to figure out what was going on. But then Yu says that he took her body to the restroom, wondering why, but he says that he was just trying to find a place to hide. But Iori then says what's important is that Fujishima is in love with her as she breaks down crying again. Inaba then says that they should focus on the body swapping, but then Goto opens the door to the club room, but they notice he's acting emotionless. But he says that he's fine, saying that the problem is that he lacks motivation, tenacity, courage, spirit, and all other stuff, and then saying that he came to see if they were panicking over the personality swap. They ask how does he know about this, but he asks them to stop calling him Goto, as that's not who he is. He says that Heartseed counts as his name, and then says that he basically plays the role of an observer, and that he's just borrowing Goto's body at the moment. He then informs them that they will randomly swap personalities for the time being, and that he'll be observing them, but that they don't have to worry about him invading their privacy 24/7, as that would require effort. Inaba asks him why them, if he's able to control this phenomenon, how do they make it stop and what's his objective? Heartseed answers by saying that they seem like a fascinating bunch, and that after they switch for a bit, and he's like, yeah, that was fun, the phenomenon will stop, implying that he controls it. He then tells them to not worry too much about it and carry on with their lives and not to bother trying to figure out how it works, as that's not the task they've been assigned. They later head back to their homes talking about what happened. Iori tells them that after that, she went to talk with Goto, but he, in his usual self, told her that he's just been sitting there doing paperwork. Iori says that it sounded like he didn't notice a thing, and then they talk about what they should do. Inaba tells them to stay in contact when their personalities switch and to do their best impression if they're with others. 1 week later, they meet up in Inaba's room, with her reprimanding them for going into the wrong bathroom while in the opposite body. After that, she asked the boys about the virtue of the girls' bodies, but they saw that they shouldn't worry, with Aoki saying that this is the kind of situation where mutual trust is important, making Inaba realize that he's right after all. Yu then tells Iori that when she switched bodies with her the other night, she saw no one else in her home and asks her why, saying that it's not safe to leave a girl alone at night. So Iori reveals that her parents are divorced and that she lives with her mom, but that she's really busy. Later, Teichi, Aoki, and Yu head back to their homes, but suddenly, Aoki switches bodies with Iori. She gets surprised at how tall Aoki is, so she tries to pet Yu, but she moves back, though she says that it's because she's in Aoki's body. Later, Teichi and Iori wait for a train, but Teichi notices that she seems off, with she then saying that she screwed up. But as Taichi asks what's in her mind, she tells Teichi that since people typically use physical appearance to identify a person, their body is the foundation of their identity. So as she says that since their bodies lose significance due to the personality swap, she asks if will they still be themselves. But she then says that she's just kidding, and then Oki switches back to his body after that. The next day at school, Teichi tells Inaba that Iori seemed different yesterday, but Iori then arrives. But then Fujishima, being the class leader, asks for 3 people in their class to volunteer for the off-campus cleanup. She volunteers herself as everyone seems to not want to. So Teichi then tries to volunteer, but right as he does, he switches bodies with Inaba, making it appear as if she was the one volunteering. So Inaba, in Teichi's body, pissed off, says that she'll volunteer as well. After school, they head out, but then Fujishima stops Teichi and asks him what his relationship with Iori is. So Inaba, in Teichi's body, tells her that Iori belongs to him and to stay away from her, as Teichi is left in shock at this. Back in their bodies, Teichi complains to Inaba about what she told Fujishima, but she says that this way he can rescue Iori from Fujishima's clutches. Teichi, though, tells her that she doesn't want to turn a classmate into an enemy, but Inaba tells him that everyone but you yourself is an enemy, and then she asks him if he's in love with Iori. He asks what makes her say that, so she says that he's been overreacting lately instead of being a stoic lump, but he says that it's because of the body swap situation. She then tells him to date Iori before Fujishima does, but he asks why does she keep pushing him to do that. So she tells him that facing adversity to save someone fits him perfectly, and calls him a selfless freak. Teichi asks what does she mean by this, but she then asks why did he volunteer for this. So he says that because nobody else wanted to, he had to volunteer to make sure no one else would have to suffer. She then talks about Iori again, saying that she's the weakest link in Stu CS, saying that she knows how close she was to completely breaking down, and by asking if this isn't what Teichi's looking for, she says that Iori needs someone to shield her from pain and hurt, which sounds like a work for a selfless freak. Teichi gets mad, saying that he's never looked at her like that, but Inaba then says that Iori's in love with him, though he says that that can't be right. But he's then told that Iori needs someone who will be there to unconditionally support her. But then she says that she fears Yori is the one most in danger, as she's been taking the brunt of the adverse effects of the personality swap. Later in the club room, Aoki and Taichi have swapped bodies with Inaba and Yu, so they record each other confessing to themselves. But the girls then arrive and Yu takes their phones away and watch the recordings, which makes Inaba strip Aoki's body off his clothes, then saying that she'll now run buck naked in the campus, with Taichi and Aoki begging her not to. Later, back in their own bodies, the guys make up for what they did. But then Aoki asks Yu if she's scared of them, saying that every time he's Yu, he begins to shake whenever there's a man around. Yu though tells him that's nonsense, but they notice she's shaking, despite her saying that she wouldn't fear men, as she's stronger than them. This makes Aoki apologize, saying that he never realized she's been hurting. But Yu then storms off the room, so Aoki tries to chase after her, but Inaba tells him not to and explains that she knew of her phobia, saying that Yu was good at concealing her fear, but that she's got it pretty bad. She then goes after her, but Aoki gets sad at this, as he says that in retrospect there were signs. At this, Takechi tells him that he hasn't changed even despite the personality swaps, so Aoki tells him that his policy is to enjoy life as he goes, though then gets mad at himself for acting serious just now. They later leave the school with Aoki running off, saying that he needs to call Yui. At night, Taichi watches the TV with his sister, but then he switches bodies with Yu, but notices that she's been crying. He then gets a call from Yu, saying that she was probably crying but not to let it concern him, but then Taichi tells her to meet up somewhere. They meet up in a park and she explains that Aoki called her right before they switched, saying that he was apologizing over and over. This made her think that he and Aoki would begin to avoid her, and that made her sorry for herself. Taichi then asks her if she suffers from androphobia, to which she says that she does, so Gen asks what was the cause. She says that she's only told Inaba this and explains that back in middle school she was but she managed to escape. She then says that as she's won against every man she faced in karate, she was convinced she could fend off anyone, but that when it really happened, she barely managed to escape. So she says that this made her realize that men are very strong, and that she wouldn't be able to fight them off. Taichi offers her help, but Yu says that she doesn't want to cause others trouble, but he tells her that she'll be more trouble as long as she has androphobia. So he then tells her that she's going to teach her how to beat a man. So he approaches her and tells her to touch him. So she does, but he then kicks his body in which makes Yu fall to the ground in pain. And as he tells her she now knows how to beat a man, they suddenly switch bodies, with Taichi now shrieking in pain. But Yu then notices that someone is coming, so as she doesn't want anyone to see them, she drags Taichi with her away. They end up on a bridge, but Yu notices that she grabbed Taichi's hand without fear. They then walk, with Yu saying that one blow is all she needs to win against men. But she then asks Taichi why did he do that for her, saying that he hurt himself in the process, but he tells her if can he just help. The next day, Fujishima interrogates Taichi, asking if she was with a girl last night in a playground. He denies it, so she apologizes, saying that she thought she had caught him in the act of cheating. After that, Yu approaches him and repeatedly pats his back while smiling, then telling him that she might get back into martial arts now. She then leaves, but Taichi then notices that his friends were watching. Taichi tries to explain that he only gave Yu a push, but Aoki, concerned, drags Iori away to strategize, though she says it's none of her business. Inaba gets surprised though, saying that she thought the personality swapping would destroy them, but that instead it did some good. But she then suddenly faints, but Taichi manages to grab her. Inaba wakes up in the nurse's office, surrounded by her friends. She tells them that this wasn't because of heartseed, but that she's just been feeling a little sick. Later, Yaori and Taichi accompany her back home despite her displeasure. But Inaba then tells Taichi to say what really happened yesterday with Yu. So Taichi, excluding the private parts, tells them what happened, which makes Inaba laugh at him, but Yori, looking down, says that she never realized Yu was scared of men. Taichi, though, tells her that she should try to act normal around Yu, but this makes Inaba say that the two of them would make the perfect couple, saying that they need each other, though Yori tells her not to decide things like that on her own. They later drop Inaba at her home, but before they leave, Inaba tells Yori that she should have Taichi cure her trauma as well. This makes Yori pissed as she tells Inaba that she promised not to tell anyone. Later, they both walk together and Yori tells Taichi that she'll talk, but only if he promises that nothing will change. He accepts, so she explains that she's had 5 dads as her mom keeps getting divorced and remarried, explaining that back in 1st grade, her second dad was so she made sure that nothing bad happened by adopting a persona that fit his preferences, and that since then she's been switching between personas. But that last spring, her 5th dad on his bed told her you need to start living your own life, and after her mom apologized to her for being so selfish her entire life. But her dad's words left her stunned, as she had forgotten how she truly was after spending most of her life trying to live as someone else wanted. so she decided to keep on using personas based on the Sichuregyo. She then says that she prided herself on being able to guess what others wanted, but that she started to lose her touch as she didn't see that Yu had androphobia, and the personality swap deal made things worse, saying that nobody, nor herself, will eventually be able to recognize her anymore. But Taichi tells her that that'll never happen, saying that he'll always be able to recognize her for who she is. But she asks how can he be so sure, and as he thinks to himself that it's because I'm in love with, he thinks on Inaba calling him a selfless freak, so he just says to trust him, which Yori ends up believing. The next day, Yori meets Taichi at the school entrance, who tells him that she's fine now, but that the one he'd worry for is Inaba, as she arrives looking down. Later, Inaba's now throwing up in the restrooms, but it's actually Taichi in her body as Yori and Inaba wait for him outside. She then tells Yori to go to class and takes Taichi to the club room, resting him on the couch, but they then swap bodies back. She tells him to go to class, but Taichi says that he wants to help her. But they then argue as to why, as Inaba asks why they have to be so nice to her, then muttering why couldn't they be a little darker. Though she then says that she's the one who needs to change, but Taichi then asks if she's Uk, which makes her accidentally exclaim that she isn't, as she then tells him to forget that. Taichi then asks her if she isn't the one hurting the most because of the personality swap, but she then says that she's looking weak in front of an enemy. Though she then explains that they're her very best friends, but that in turn it makes them her worst enemies. So after Taichi insists, she explains that she can't trust them, saying that any of them could commit a crime while another's body, and those thoughts keep her up all night. But she says that she hates herself for being like this. She then says that she doesn't trust anyone, which means that everyone's an enemy to her, and that Taichi's her worst one, as he's the one who trusts her the most. She then says that despite not trusting anyone, she still wants to have fun with everyone, but that indecision is causing her agony. She then explains that this isn't because of trauma, which can be cured, saying that she's always been like this, and says that if she tries to change, she won't be the same person anymore. But Taichi says that it doesn't matter what she's born with, saying that she's fine the way she is, and that she shouldn't force herself to change as everyone will still accept her. So he then tries to have her reveal her secret to their friends, but she refuses. So Taichi chooses to reveal a secret he was planning to take to the grave in exchange for her having to tell her secret. He reveals that he's married to her before. She stares at him and asks if he's also done this with Yori and Yui, which he affirms embarrassed, so she then bursts out laughing, but as he tries to excuse himself, she insults him repeatedly. But then she says that she thinks he's fine the way he is, but that revealing that was stupid. But then says that what's really stupid is that she's actually touched by this. Later, they meet up with their friends and she explains her situation, but they all understand her and not make a huge deal of it, to her surprise. They later walk back home with Inaba relieved, but she then talks with Taichi about his secret, so she chooses to reveal hers to him by saying that she's also masturbated to him before. Yori, Taichi, and Inaba watch from a bush as Aoki confesses her love to Yui, saying that she might have changed her mind now. But she says never, followed by not yet. She then asks why does he love her, so he says that from the first moment he saw her, he knew he would fall for her, and then fell in love with her to this day. But Yui then explains that he only sees him as a friend, as that's the best she can manage right now. But Aoki says that he at least has a chance. They then leave to have lunch, though Yui gets angry at him for thinking that it's a date. After that, Inaba explains that she knew this would happen because she saw a text from Aoki as she switched bodies with Yui. Later at noon, Taichi sees Yori enter the club room, but she says that she's Inaba now. So she then asks him how does he feel about Yori. So he says that he likes being her friend and that he doesn't want to ruin that. But then Inaba enters the room as it turns out they didn't switch bodies, and Yori, crying, says that she really fooled him and then storms off the room. Inaba gets angry at Taichi, but he tells her that she was pretending to have switched bodies. But then he remembers that he told Yori that he always recognized her regardless of anything, which makes him say that he's really pathetic, as Yori wanted him to trust her. Inaba asks if she can hit him, which he accepts, so she punches him and tells him to chase her down. So Taichi does so, but then runs into Fujishima and asks her if she's seen Yori. She hands him her bike keys, saying that she wasn't able to help her, but figures out that she needs Taichi. So he then tries to find her using it, and ends up doing so on a bridge and apologizes for what happened, though she says that it was her fault. Taichi then tells her that he really admires her, praising the way she enjoys life, but she says that it's because of her personas. But Taichi asks if that's really the case, explaining that everything she does is a part of her as she's still Yori Nagase, but she says that there's no such person, as no one can't wear all those masks. But Taichi says that everyone wears masks, explaining that all the things she does, like behaving differently around others and thinking about which role to play, are perfectly normal. She says that's all nonsense, so Teichi says that it is, but not at first though. They then laugh and Iori tells him that she admires him for always being himself. Teichi then reveals to her that he loves her and asks her to go out with him. But then, as she smiles, Heartseed takes control of her body. He says that he apologizes, but says that it's their fault for being too boring. So Gen stands on top of the fence and throws himself and Iori's body into the river. Later at night, Iori's now unconscious in the hospital with her friends waiting outside. But then Heartseed shows up and tells them that Iori's body will die soon. Inaba, angry, asks if he's playing God with their lives, but he denies it, although he affirms that he's capable of many things. He then tells them to choose which personality will die with Iori's body, and that for the next 30 minutes, they'll be able to switch bodies by oral request. Teichi tries to grab him, but he fends him off and then leaves. So Teichi says that he'll sacrifice himself, but Inaba gets mad at him, asking if he's considered how Iori would feel, and calls him a selfish freak. But Teichi yells at her that he doesn't want to see anyone else suffer, and that he'd rather suffer in their place, since that way, he'd know how much pain they endure, and that way he could bear his own pain, revealing that he's not doing this for anyone else, but that rather he's a selfless freak for his own good. This makes Inaba realize and say that something's wrong with him. It says that it's a gentle form of insanity, though she says that he should then understand their pain. Oki then decides to switch bodies with Iori so they can talk with her. Iori is confused by being there, saying that she was just with Teichi, but Inaba then explains what happened. After this, Iori decides that she'll be the one who dies, as she wouldn't be able to live with herself if someone in her place. She then decides to talk with each of them individually, and she does, with Teichi being the last one. She tells Teichi that she wants to answer his love confession, but she first asks him why is he stoic right now as always, though he tells her that he's so sad he could, but says that she must feel even worse now and then hugs her, with her saying that she doesn't want to die, and then tells Teichi that she loves him, but says that she can't go out with him as she's about to die, so instead, she wants a memory to remember him by, and after saying that she's sure Inaba will forgive her, she kisses him. Afterwards, Iori tells Heartseed that she'll be the one who dies, but asks him if he won't do this to anyone else, which he affirms. The time then runs up and Inaba switches bodies back automatically as a doctor then comes out of the room, who tells them that Iori is going to survive. They're left shocked at this as Heartseed shows up again and tries to give them baked sweets as an apology. They get relieved at this, but Inaba asks how much of this was planned. So Heartseed says that she could say that everything is part of his plan since they don't seem to realize what he's capable of, and then says that he'd never cause any trouble for an innocent person. He then says that he won't ask for their forgiveness, but that he hopes they won't hold a grudge, since they also benefited from the experience, and then leaves as Iori wakes up. After a while, they welcome Iori back to the school. They say that no more body swapping has been happening as it looks like it's over. They then have dessert, but Inaba then tells Teichi that he stole her first kiss, and that it's going to cost him dearly. 3 weeks have passed since the personality swapping stopped. Teichi talks about his mutual confession with Iori, but says that they haven't had a chance to talk alone due to the club room paper and her recovery. Now in school, Teichi finds Inaba in the club room. He talks with her, but then suddenly, Inaba begins to take her clothes off and tells Teichi he takes his off so they can do it. Teichi thinks that she's joking, but they both end up falling onto the floor as Teichi ends up grabbing her breast. But Yu and Oki then enter the room with Yu demanding him to get off. Teichi says that it's not what it looks like, but suddenly, Yu breaks a table with one hit, demanding to know what the hell is going on. Iori then arrives, shocked at the broken table, as Inaba then chooses to leave. At night, Teichi wonders what happened in the club room, but he then gets hit with a thought that says, is it okay to leave it like this? Which makes him rush off down the stairs and try to leave the house, but his sister then asks him if he's going out. He answers outside and hears Iori worriedly ask him, are we, only to suddenly stop and then say that she thinks she called him unconsciously, saying that she had a feeling that she needed to talk to him. He explains that he had a sudden urge to see her as well, and that his body was moving by itself. Iori says that something's not right, but Teichi then asks her what did she want to say when she called him. They then both reveal that they wanted to talk about the confession and reveal that their feelings remain the same as they were back then. Iori then says that she feels embarrassed, so decides to call it a day and hangs up on him. The next day at school, Teichi runs into Inaba, but shockingly, she tells him that Yu and Oki were taken into police custody, though they don't know why. But Fujishima, who's been hearing, tells them that she knows as her dad is a high-ranking police officer, but that she'll only tell them if they let her rent Iori for 2 hours. This makes Teichi get hit with a don't touch her thought, which makes him violent, but Inaba notices and stops him as he comes back to his senses. But Fujishima then says that she was just joking and reveals that in the morning, Yu beat up some guys who were annoying some girls, but as she used too much force, she was taken by the cops. Oki saw this and uncharacteristically tried to stop them, but ended up taken away as well. Later, they discuss about the situation and Inaba points out that Teichi acted strangely earlier and asks if he heard a voice in his head. Teichi and Yori imply that they have, but then Heartseed shows up. He explains that now he's unleashed their deepest desires and says that they could say that he's helping them discover their true selves. Inaba then asks him if it's against the rules to hide in their rooms, so he tells her that it could be just as entertaining, and if not, he can make it so and leaves afterwards. The next day, Opi's now back at school, but Yui hasn't attended. They conclude that their desires were unleashed yesterday, with Teichi pointing out that that's why Inaba made a move on him. But she punches him and tries to explain that that happened because she saw a dirty picture beforehand. Inaba then says that they won't be able to keep this hidden from others unlike the body swap, so Oki says that they have to help each other with that now. At night, Hedorah calls Teichi, who tells him that it's better if things stay status quo for now due to their desires being out of control. Teichi accepts this, and then Ora confesses that she's a little excited about the situation, as she may discover the real her now. Teichi arrives late to school as he explains to Inaba that his desire to sleep was triggered, saying that he couldn't wake up at all, which scared her sister, though they eventually woke up. He then notices that Edori has her face against her desk, so she explains that earlier, in the middle of the quiz, her desire made her want to break the tension, so she suddenly shouted, "Yaku," though everyone wrote it off as Yori being herself. Later at noon, they notice that Yu didn't come to school again, so Inaba tells them that she told Yu about what Heartseed did, but that they all needed to talk together. Aoki then says that she told Yu via call that they dropped by, but she told him not to, and that she'd be back to school by the end of the week, saying that everyone would have gotten over the incident with the cops by then. Hoki then says that he'll make Heartseed pay if he makes her cry again, but Inaba then has him list things she likes about Yu. This calms him down, and Inaba tells him to avoid intense emotional outbursts, so he says that he'll calm down by thinking about Yu if that happens. Then, Yori says that Yu's probably still in shock after the other day, which makes Teichi have the desire to help her, so he tries to leave, but Inaba notices this and has Aoki and Yori stop him. But he then comes back to his senses. They later walk back home, but then Inaba tells Teichi that he's the one in the most danger now, saying that since he was ready to for Yori before, he could die if that desire is unleashed now. The next day, they notice that Yu is absent again, so they decide to go visit her. Later, they do so, but upon ringing on her doorbell, Yu tells them to leave. But then, her mother shows up and lets them in. Though she still won't let them in her room, so Inaba chooses to reveal her bust/waist/hip measurements, which makes Yu promptly open her door and say that she'll let them in, but to stop. Now inside, they find out she's been avoiding school due to her desires being unleashed, as she says that she doesn't want to hurt anyone. But Inaba, getting angry, tells her that the problem is Heartseed, as you could lose interest and put them in danger again, and then yells at Yu to take responsibility and not to expect someone else to help her out if she cries. This makes Yu cry, but Inaba apologizes, saying that she had her desire unleashed. The next day at school, Iori has a discussion with her classmate, Satuchi, acting angry due to her desire, but she then snaps out of it and apologizes. Teichi then notices that Inaba, instead of helping, leaves the classroom. Later, Teichi runs into Inaba, but she tries to leave, though he stops her, saying that they need to go see Yu again. But she tells him that she can't do anything that might make the situation worse, saying that she won't go to the club room as well. This makes Teichi's desire of that's no excuse be unleashed, and tells her that he's disappointed on her, saying that he never thought she'd give up on her friends, saying that he thought she was better than that. But he then snaps out of it, and as Inaba says that she guesses she's not good enough for him, she leaves. Later, Teichi meets up with Iori and Oki in the club room, and they decide to go visit Yu by themselves. But Iori then receives a text from her, telling them not to come. Teichi apologizes to Inaba for yesterday, but she says that she's not upset, as he only said those things because he's worried about Yu, but says that she won't go to the club room or to Yu's house just yet. Later, Teichi, Yori, and Oki are in the club room worrying about Inaba and Yu. They remember that yesterday they went to Yu's house, but no one answered. Teichi says to go visit her again, but Yori says that their desires might be unleashed and make things worse, though that if Yu keeps this up, Heartseed might try something. Teichi says that he wants to help Yu, but Oki tells him that he's only worried about dealing with her problem and that he needs to think ahead. But they then get into an argument with Aoki sarcastically asking if his selfless behavior will save the day again, but then yell at each other about if they should go see Yui or not. Teichi ends up deciding to go by himself, saying that he can save Yu, but Aoki tells him who does he think he is, asking if he seriously believes he can save everyone. But Teichi tells him that that's what happened when they were swapping personalities while Oki didn't help at all. But Inaba then gets in between them, telling Taichi that he's getting too full of himself and that Aoki is getting too jealous. But then Taichi gets the desire to not let her interfere and hits her with his bag, making her hit her head against a corner. But Taichi then snaps out of it as Aoki calls him a selfish bastard who doesn't care if anyone is hurt in the process, though he then apologizes for saying that. Later at night, Taichi remembers that Iori didn't blame him but rather his desire, but then remembers that his desires weren't unleashed when he was arguing against Aoki, which makes him angry. He then thinks on how his desire ended up hurting Iori and realizes that this is how Yu feels. The next day, Taichi goes to school, but as he's worried about having another episode of his desires unleashing, he decides to ignore his friends. Later, Dori asks Taichi and Inaba if they're going to the club room, but they say that they won't today. The following day, Fujishima announces that there will be a field trip for everyone in their grade, and that they'll be assigning 6 groups of 5 people. Taichi's friend Wate's Shingo asks him to team up with him, but then says that they must include Fujishima in their group as he likes her. Iori tries to team up with Inaba, but she tells her to get away from her. But as Inaba says this is for her own good, they then argue, so Iori begins to get aggressive, but Inaba calms her down and tells her to go away again. Iori then leaves the classroom, but then Fujishima says that Inaba and Iori will join her group as she wants them to get along since otherwise they'll ruin the experience for the entire class. Inaba objects this, but Fujishima says that she can do this as she's the class representative and then adds Taichi and Wates to their group as well. Later, Taichi sees Iori and Inaba talking, but the latter leaves as Iori tries to keep her there. But Iori then approaches him, saying that she'll be waiting for him in the club room. Taichi then goes back to the classroom and sees Goto enter the room, first thinking that he was Heartseed, who asks him for help in moving the classroom's lectern to the storehouse. He helps him and later they arrive at the storehouse. He then helps Goto with cleaning it up, but then Goto asks him if he's noticing that he looks sad and tells him to talk to a friend, then telling him that he'll discover that problems have a way of working themselves out if he talks to his friends. They then take a new lectern back, and on the way, Taichi tells him that his friends might get hurt if he talks with them, but Goto tells him that hurting and troubling each other is what friends are for. Back at the classroom, they run into Fujishima. Goto tells her to help Taichi, thinking that they're friends, but she says that he's her rival instead. Regardless, she later hears Taichi out as he asks what would she do if talking to someone might hurt them. So she then asks him what is more important to him, not hurting that person or talking to them and making something happen. She then leaves, but this has made Taichi decide to go to the club room, but finds no one inside it now. But he then sees that Iori left him a note on the chalkboard, where she says that she went to visit Yu again, and apologizes if he dropped by after she left. Iori rushes to the club room as Taichi sent her an email where he said he wanted to talk. He tells her that he realized he's a selfish and self-centered person, and that once his mind is made up, he locks himself in and ignores all other possible conclusions, and that he'll never admit that he's wrong if he thinks he's right about something, saying that this is why he ended up hurting his friends and why he decided to distance himself. But he then says that he realized he wants to be with them, even if he has to risk it. He then says that he plans on bringing the club back together by telling them the same thing. Though Iori then tells him that she was trying hard to bring them back together, but that he just took it all upon himself, saying that he indeed is a selfish freak, but that his head is usually in the right place even if his methods aren't the best. So Iori decides to call Inaba, while Taichi will deal with Aoki. Later, Taichi meets up with Aoki and apologizes for everything he said to him the other day, saying that he was too full of himself. But Aoki tells him that he beat him at this, saying that he also wants to apologize. He then says that it hurt him when Iori said that he was getting too jealous, but admits that she's right, saying that he's jealous of Taichi because he saved everyone, while he did nothing. Though Taichi says that he honestly saved them by chance, but Aoki, regardless, apologizes. Iori then arrives and tells them that Inaba ignored her, but then says that she's going to drop by her house later. Later, Edoki and Taichi talk about how they want to help Yu. Oki and says he has no idea how Taichi was able to cure Yu's trauma, so he says that it was thanks to the personality swap and says that they could maybe help her out using the desires phenomenon. This makes Aoki come up with an idea. They go to Yu's house, and to their surprise, she lets them into her room. She tells them that she fears hurting someone, but Aoki tells her that he can stop herself, and that if he can prove it's possible, she'll be able to go outside again. So to do this, he repeats to Yu that he really loves her, and then says that he always has really dirty thoughts, then saying that if he had an episode right now, he'd throw himself on her. But Yu throws her plushies at him, calling him a sicko, but Aoki tries to explain that his ironclad determination will stop him from doing that. So he then tells Yu to spend the night in a love hotel, but she asks why would she put herself in danger, so Aoki says that the last thing he wants to do is hurt her, as he truly loves her, being confident that his desire to not hurt her will always be stronger, but that she can beat him up if it isn't. Taichi then tells her that as she didn't feel like she was using while practicing karate, she didn't understand what it meant to hurt someone. So now that she does, her desire to not hurt someone will probably triumph if she ever feels aggressive. She then tells her that he hurt Adore due to a desire, so he kinda understands how she feels, saying that he imagines she wants to be with them, as he also wants that. To this, Yu ends up deciding to go to school, but asks them to stop her if she loses control. Though Ilki tells her to instead say something else, which she repeats as "please protect me." So he then kneels and tells her that it'd be his honor. The next day, Yu goes to school and Yuiori alongside her friends welcome her back. They later go to the club room where they find a lot of food from Yu, as she ended up buying a lot of it due to having an episode at the store. Aoki then has his desire to eat Unleash, followed by the rest of them as well. The next day, Yu meets up with Inaba and tells her that she's gotten over what she told her the other day and that everyone's waiting for her in the club room. At night, Inaba is now in her room, but she's then told by her mom that Mr. Godo has come to visit her. But she notices that it's actually Heartseed. He asks her if she's been surfing the web, saying that that's all she ever did in middle school, putting up barriers and being alone outside class, not trusting anyone. But Inaba tells him to get to the point, so he reminds her that he'd make things entertaining if necessary. So he then asks her why does she care so much about preserving the atmosphere she shares with her friends, saying that if it's wearing her out, she'd tear it down. This shocks her, as Heartseed then says that judging from her state of mind, if her group falls apart, she'll try to destroy the world, or at least, that's what he was hoping. But he then tells her that there's something she's trying to pretend she doesn't know, but that if those feelings get out, it'll destroy their friendship. And he then asks if there isn't someone he cares for deeply, but Inaba shouts at him to shut up as she blushes, but Heartseed says that there's no turning back now that she's fully aware of her feelings. She asks if she can hit him, but he says he'd return control to Godo if she does. He then says that he won't visit anyone else, but Inaba asks why use Godo's body instead of anyone else's, to which he responds that there are very few people who won't ask questions when they notice they have blanks in their memory. He then tells her to stop hiding in her room and leaves. The next day, she joins her friends to the school trip. The students have now arrived at the camping place. As Taichi lost in rock, paper, scissors, his group is forced to use one of the dirtiest tables, so they clean it up, and he then accompanies Inaba to throw out some trash bags as he tells her that according to his horoscope, he has the worst possible luck today. They then notice that the place they're at now is next to a huge cliff, so she tells Taichi to be careful given his luck. But she then notices that he's now happy, and he says that it's because it's been ages since they talked casually, which makes her blush and then leave. Later, they're now cutting their food. Taichi compliments Idori's technique, but then he tells Inaba that her cutting looks rough. But this angers her and says that she's awesome at this if she tries hard enough. Afterwards, Fujishima ends up making curry, which they all find delicious. Later, they wash the dishes, but Taichi notices that Inaba is bleeding from her finger and grabs her hand to wash it, but this annoys her and makes her leave, though Yor goes after her. After that, Inaba then stares at her wound and then kisses it, but she notices that Iori was watching. Yori, perplexed at this, asks, "Are you in love with?" But this makes Inaba run away as she thinks to herself that Yori knows. As that happens, Taichi goes to drop some trash bags next to the cliff. Idori chases after Inaba, and as she catches up to her, she asks Inaba if she's in love with Taichi too, which makes Inaba fall to her knees. She then asks why was she trying to get them together then, but she then suddenly begins behaving aggressively and yells at Inaba that if she doesn't explain, she'll no longer be her friend. So Inaba says that that was the only way the five of them could stay together, saying that since she's looking for emotional support and Taichi's naturally inclined to do that, everything would work out, but Yori calls her an idiot at this. Inaba then says that she never wanted to lose the only friend she's ever made, but Yori tells her that she should have said something, but Inaba says that she can't since if she shows people how weak she is, they won't need her anymore, and saying that she didn't have a choice. But Yori tells her that she didn't have to do anything, but Inaba says otherwise, calling herself a worthless, unwanted failure. But Yori tells her not to call herself like that, though Inaba says that it's true, and that she's not a good person like them. Yori then asks her how does she think that makes her feel for liking her. She then stops being aggressive and tells her that she and her friends love her, but Inaba says that they love the fake her, who's strong and knows what she's doing, though Yori tells her that she'd like her no matter what mess she is, and then tells her that she simply can't label people as good or bad as she's been doing with herself, then telling her that she wants to always be her friend. Inaba cries at this, saying that she always wanted to hear someone say that, but says that it's too late, saying that she can't go back to the club room as it would be awkward now. But Yori asks her if wouldn't it also work out if Inaba got with Taichi as well. But upon seeing Inaba deny her feelings, she tells her not to, and that since she's also trying to fight for their friendship, she tells her that the Inaba she knows would fight for both, and that their friendship wouldn't end because of a man anyways. Inaba smiles at this, and while crying, tells her that she gets it, and that she'll fight for Teichi's love, though Yori tells her that she doesn't plan on giving up on him, and then both laugh together as they remain friends. But then Heartseed takes control of Yori's body. She tells Inaba that the desired business is about to end, but that he thought it'd be amusing to tell her that there was an accident, saying that Teichi fell. Inaba then sprints out of the forest as she thinks on how Heartseed told her that he didn't do anything this time. She then exits it and finds her friends and Teichi with them, who only appears bruised as Aoki explains that he fell off a tree while trying to save a kitten. Inaba then cries, but then elbows Teichi, telling him not to make her worry, but then falls to her knees and begins crying disconsolately. Later, at noon, Aoki, Yu, and Yori discuss about how the desire deal is over, but then wonder where Teichi and Inaba are, but then head home, though Yori ends up looking worried. Meanwhile, Inaba meets up with Teichi, who confesses to him that she loves him. Teichi says that he's happy to hear this, but tells her that right now he's in love with Yori. But Inaba laughs, saying that right now means that she still has a chance. She then tells Teichi that Yori knows of this already so he doesn't have to worry, and then kisses Teichi on the lips, saying that he took her first one without asking, so another one can't hurt. She then leaves and then runs off as she says she's so embarrassed she could, but then laughs. Teichi and Inaba watch over 3 children while they go visit a shrine on New Year. Inaba then feeds Teichi, but Futashima takes a picture of them as that happens. But then she notices that one of those kids looks exactly like Yori, but this makes Teichi escape from there, as he wonders how did he end up in this situation. Teichi then explains that after the desire deal was over, they enjoyed quiet for a while, though the deal with Inaba and Yori was still up in the air. But then on the last day of school, Teichi found his friends' names written on their chalkboard alongside 12 o'clock p.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. Yu says that no one remembers writing that, and then time hits 12 o'clock p.m. Yori and Yua then say that it feels like their body's on fire, as they then turn into children. Later, they find out that Mayori and Yui are 6 and 11 years old respectively, and that they don't remember anything from beyond their current age, nor are aware of the time reversal, though they don't question why they're there, and that they still recognize the other club members. The time then hits 5 o'clock p.m., and Iori and Yu turn back to normal. They then go to a restaurant, and Iori and Yui explain that they don't remember anything, that they keep remembering stuff that happened when they were that age. As winter vacation begins tomorrow, they choose that they'll hide in an uninhabited building near Inaba's house during the time they turn into children. Later, Teichi arrives at his house and is welcomed by his sister, but then she goes emotionless, so he asks if this is Heartseed. He says that he is, but that he's not, and tells him to call him number 2, explaining that he's not the Heartseed he knows. He then says that he needs Teichi to become a knight as he needs someone unaffected to watch over the children. He informs Teichi that the phenomenon won't last long, but that if he tells anyone else about him, it will never end, and then returns control to his sister. The next day, Teichi runs into Yua, who's talking with a girl who asks her why did she quit, and asks her about a promise she made her. Teichi then approaches them, so Yua introduces her as Mihashi Chinatsu, a friend from when she practiced karate, but Yua then decides to run away with Teichi. She then explains that she's more of a rival from when she practiced karate, who she hadn't seen since she moved, but then says that she can't remember the promise she made her. They then run into Iori and head to the abandoned building, where they make camp with Inaba and Oki. The time then hits 12 o'clock p.m. again, and it's now Inaba and Oki, the ones who turn into children. Iori and Yu find Inaba very cute and begin to pamper her a lot, only to end up tired afterwards, but Teichi tells them that she's now afraid of them. So they then give the children some sodas, but Aoki thanks Nana's big sister, thinking that Yua is that person. Teichi then verifies that he recognizes them, but still calls Yua Nana's big sister, though he then says that she sure looks like Yua. They later interact with the children, but then notice that it's almost 5 o'clock p.m. now. So they try to change their clothes, but time runs out, which makes Inaba find herself naked. Later, they're explained what happened, and Inaba talks about how Teichi's name is missing on the chalkboard, making her wonder if he's the only one whose time won't be reversed, though then says that Heartseed will probably show up to explain what's happening. After that, Yu asks Aoki who Nana is, but Aoki asks how does she know that name. So Yu tells him that when he was 10 years old, he thought she was her big sister. So he explains that Nana was a girl who he went out with when he was younger, but she then moved away. This makes Yu and his friends think that the reason Oki likes her is because she looks like Nana. At night, Teichi and Oki are now in a train, and Oki tells Teichi that the age change made him remember how much he loved Nana. He then says that he loves Yu, but that he used to love Nana. but then wonders when did he forget that he loves Nana, wondering if those feelings still exist. Meanwhile, Yu in her home watches her trophy cabinet, but is then approached by her sister, who says that she thought she never wanted to look at it again after quitting karate. She then says that she ran into Mihashi earlier, and then asks Yu why did she quit karate, but Yu then begins to cry at this. The next day, Teichi runs into Iori on the way to the abandoned building. She asks him to watch her closely when she's a kid for a bit to see what she was like. She then asks him if he would redo his life given the chance, saying that she would to do a better job this time. Later, Aoki and Iori are the ones affected now, being now 11 and 14 years old respectively. Inaba and Teichi go out with Iori, but as Iori says that she's cold, Teichi hands her his gloves. She thanks him by saying, "I love you." Big Brother saying that she had a feeling he liked being called that, with Teichi realizing that this is what Iori was capable of when she switched personas. Inaba though gets mad at him and pulls his ear. But at this, Iori says that they're in sync like a real couple, which makes Inaba say that she's a good girl and that she'll buy her something nice, as Teichi thinks that she's a monster being capable of even winning Inaba over. Now in a store, Inaba asks Teichi what was she like when she was a kid, so he says that she was scared of Aori and Yu, but that it was their fault. Though Inaba says that she was always scared, and that she still is. She then says that everyone has secrets and things they don't want to remember, and says that this phenomenon could lead to disaster, as she says that she's worried. Aoki and Iori's ages are now reversed, but the latter turns into a baby, so they go buy stuff she'll need. But then they run into Yu's sister and Mihashi, who say that they decided to follow her since she was acting strange. Inaba decides to run away with the children, so Yu's sister asks her if she had that baby with Teichi or if Inaba is the mother, but they both deny all that. Later, she sends her sister back home, so then Mihashi asks what club she's in now. Yu reveals that she's in the Student Cultural Society, and that they gather there to have fun. But Mihashi asks if she does anything at all there, and that if she has any purpose to her life, saying that she's become weak and uncool, paling in comparison to her former self. Later, back in the building, Teichi reveals that Yu was soundly beaten, but that she left after promising to explain later. Oki then tries to cheer her up, but calls her Nana's sister, which makes Yu tell him to shut up, and that she's Yu Kiriyama, but apologizes after Oki gets startled. At night, Oki goes eat with Teichi, and complains about keeping mistaking Yu with Nana, then wondering if the real reason he loves Yu is because she reminds him of Nana. Some days later, time hits 12 o'clock p.m. again, and Inaba and Yui are now 14 years old. But Yu shouts "new" as she transforms and saying that a man tried to, as her time was reversed to right after she was assaulted. Later, as time hits 5 o'clock p.m., they turn back to normal, but Yu ends up distraught, saying that she remembers everything now. After that, Aoki and Teichi accompany Yui on the way back, but Mihashi shows up again, but now calmly asks her to explain. Though Yu tells her to shut up and that she doesn't want to think on the past. Oki tries to tell her that they should talk things out, but she says that she doesn't need an irresponsible jerk ordering her around, saying that he only likes her because she reminds him of his ex. She then tells him to get his act together, but Aoki says she's the one who needs that, as she's the one who avoids her problems. Later, Yu ends up alone with Teichi. She tells him that she remembers her promise now. She had promised Mihashi that they fight each other at the national tournament. She then reveals that she used to be mentally strong, but now she relies on everyone else to help her, but that she can't do anything in return, saying that she gave up on her dreams and abandoned everything to become an empty shell, as she then leaves in a bus. After that, Teichi meets with the club members as Yori summoned them to talk about Aoki. She asks if she doesn't like Yu anymore, but Aoki says that it's not that, but that due to the time reversal, he forgot about something important. But he then remembers, saying that he forgot to live carefree, saying that that was the decision he made back then, and then says that he'll go see Nana. At the train station, Aoki reveals that he's doing this to confirm his love. As Teichi accompanies him, Aoki explains that when he was in middle school, a girl he was close to died in a car crash. This made him realize that humans can die at any time, so he decided to always have as much fun as he can. That way, he'll be happy with his life no matter when he dies. They arrive and then go find her house. But then, close to her house, they end up running into her. Aoki says that he wanted to see her and tells her that he really loved her, but that there's someone else he loves more now. She understands and thanks him for coming to see her. Aoki then says that he has to go and leaves saying gooby. Back in their city, Aoki rushes back to the building and goes to Yu. He tells her that he believes in following whatever he feels at the moment, and that's why he doesn't usually think things through, so he got confused when his past emotions resurfaced. Then says that he went to confirm how he felt and found out that he truly loved Nana, saying that he can't deny the feelings he once had, but that he can't also deny the feelings he has now, saying that he now loves Yu. She though tells him that that's because she looks like Nana, but Aoki tells her that Nana is Nana and Yu is Yu, and reveals that he didn't fall in love with her because of her appearance, but rather because of who she is as a person, and tells her that he loves her. To this, Yu begins to cry, but then calls herself pathetic, saying that she could have explained her trauma before and worked something out, but instead made excuses. Then says that she used to hate losing, but stopped caring at some point. But then claims that thanks to Aoki, she's now inspired to become strong again. So she thanks him, and then forces herself to hug him. She keeps forcing herself and then stops as she, surprised, claims that she won, saying that she only had to try, and she then tells Aoki that she'll never lose again. But then Aoki's time is reversed, so Yu tells him that one day he'll know that she's Yu, but to her surprise, Aoki recognizes her now. Inaba then wonders how long this phenomenon will last, but Teichi tells her that it shouldn't last long. But this makes Inaba figure out that Teichi knows something and demands him to tell them. Teichi ends up revealing what happened with number 2. But then number 2 possesses Iori's body and says that it was a mistake to choose him, and reminds him of the consequences. Aoki then goes back to normal, but then Teichi turns into a child now as the time reversal is now random. At noon, they still remain in the building, as they can't go out now. Aoki suggests to talk to their parents about this, but Iori quickly refuses this, saying that it's a bad idea to tell their families. Though she then says that she has to go home to talk to her mom real quick, but her time is then suddenly reversed. Later at night, Iori still hasn't turned back. They then go sleep, but Teichi then wakes up and sees that Iori is now back to normal. They go talk, and she asks him how did she behave when she was a child, and Teichi says that she was very responsible and mature. She tells Teichi that the time reversal brings back memories of regrets they've had, and then says that Aoki and Yu impressed her earlier, but that she has a feeling she'll never get to where they are. But Teichi tells her that what she can't accomplish alone becomes doable when she's with someone else. The next day at noon, they still remain in the building, but figure they're running out of time as Yu says her mom is worried sick. Iori then receives a call from her mom, but she gets nervous as her mom hangs up. Later, she explains that her mom got back together with his second father, but that though he hasn't hit anyone yet. She then reveals that she wonders that if she had done a better job as a child, the people around her might have turned better, saying that it looks like she made the wrong choices. She then says that her mom told her not to go home, but then she receives a call from her again. But she hears her father instead, who finishes the call abruptly. Iori then doesn't know what to do now, but then she turns into a child. She now tries to go home, saying that she has to protect her mom, saying that if she does the right thing, her dad will be in a better mood. Inaba asks her why does she need to protect her mom, so she says that because she loves her. But Iori then turns back to normal. But she then tears up as she says, I remember now. So she decides to go, but Inaba stops her, telling her that the reason she messed up in the past is because she refused to ask for help. Iori reveals that she always thought she needed to do this alone because she was the one who screwed up, but then as her friends encourage her, she asks them for help. They then rush to Iori's home, though Yu stays behind with Aoki as he had his time reversed. They arrive, but then suddenly hear things shattering inside her house, so Iori rushes and knocks on the door. But then she turns into a baby, so Teichi quickly takes her and escapes. After escaping, Heartseed then shows up. He turns Iori back to normal, as he says that the phenomenon is over, but that it wasn't intentional on his part. He reveals that he and number 2 aren't wholly united, and that he has different ideas, but that he'll no longer be able to meddle with them. But he then says that since number 2 caused Iori considerable trouble, he's willing to make up for that by giving her the chance to start her life over from any point she prefers. He then tells Iori that it's too late for what she's planning to do, though Iori says that she can't accept. But she then says that she always wished she could be her true self, saying that her mom might have been happier if she had done that, and that she wouldn't have been so much trouble for everyone that way. So like she's about to say something, Inaba and Teichi hold her hands and tell her that they like her the way she is. Heartseed tells them to stop talking and says that it's Iori's decision. But Iori then says that she doesn't want to deny the person she's become and says that she doesn't need to start over. Heartseed accepts, and they then run off. They all then arrive at Iori's home, but find her mom alone now as Iori's dad left for a while. Her friends then encourage Iori to talk, so she asks her mom if she loves her dad and if she's happy, but she says that she doesn't and reveals that she's been letting him stay because she thought Iori was trying to recover something important. At this, Iori says that she thought she wanted another chance to make better choices, but that it was for her mom's sake, revealing that she wanted her to be happy, but her mom says that she only did this because she wanted to see Iori happy, which makes Iori say that she can't be happy if she isn't. But then her dad knocks on the door violently, so her mom goes, but now yells at him to shut up and to get lost as she kicks him out. After that, the students head back to their homes. In the morning, Yu apologizes to Mihashi and tells her that she's thinking about starting a karate again. Teichi then narrates that winter vacation was now over and that their lives were now back to normal. Though they have to be wary of Heartseed trying something again, he says that as long as the five of them are together, he has faith they'll find a way. Iori then thinks to herself that once again she was saved by her friends and says that Stusiest is something special, especially Teichi, saying that he's been so much help and he's a really good person. But she then wonders if she truly loves him. Teichi narrates that he may have completely misunderstood the essence of Iori, even asking himself what kind of person she is. Now in the present, he confesses to Iori that he really likes her after all and asks her to go out with him. But she apologizes and tells him to forget she ever said she loved him. Teichi asks why, but then a thought with Iori's voice hits his head, saying, "I'm not really the way you think I am, Teichi," and then she leaves. The next day, it's now Valentine's Day, but Teichi feels terrible due to being rejected by Iori. He then explains that 3 days ago, Heartseed showed up again, and now made them feel a phenomenon where their true feelings will be imparted to the others, but that the timing will be random, and that who receives whose feelings will vary as well. And that also, they will know when their own feelings are transmitted, but they won't know who received them. After that, the five of them decide that they'll get through this, and that they'll make it so Heartseed doesn't bother them again, though Iori looks off. Back in the present, Teichi explains that he confessed due to thinking that he mustn't let the phenomenon influence him. Fujishima then drags him out of the classroom, and as he looks miserable, she asks if he got dumped by Iori. She sees his reaction, so she becomes happy and teases him, but then says that she was only trying to cheer him up. But she then tells him that this is a good chance to go out with Inaba, as she says that she noticed as Inaba's a girl in love. At noon, Teichi enters the club room, but is met with his friends telling him that Goto may stop being their advisor. As he also advises the jazz club, he'll be forced to choose only one club to advise the next year, saying that this will be a problem as the benefit of Goto not being in the classroom most of the time will be gone and will become an issue with someone else due to Heartseed. He's then told that the club that earns more points in the year-end club presentations will be the one Goto chooses to stay with, so they decide to go see what the jazz club is doing. There, they find Goto masterfully playing the saxophone to their surprise as one of the jazz club members, Shirayama, tells them that that's why they need Goto. Later, back in the classroom, Oki tells them that they focus now on Valentine's Day, saying that they proclaim their feelings now instead of letting them slip whenever. At this, Yu and Oki ask Inaba if she has someone in mind, but this makes them all besides Iori get the thought that she likes Teichi to her dismay. So Inaba then explains that both he and Iori are fighting over him, but that it's nothing. But at this, Teichi's thoughts hit them, revealing that he was rejected by Iori after confessing yesterday. But at this, Inaba asks him what about her feelings, looking frustrated, but she then demands Iori to tell her why she rejected him. Iori tries to explain herself, but then all of them get a thought from her, where she coldly asks what does that have to do with anything, and why is she so mad at her, which surprises them, and then another one, where she coldly asks what's there to be upset about, as Inaba's the one who got mad. But Iori then gets a thought from Teichi, where it says that she's too different from the impression she gives, and then from Yu, saying that she's scary, and from Aoki, asking if she's really that kind of person, though they end up mortified at her hearing all of that. The next day, Iori, looking down, walks to school, but she's then approached by her friend Noriko, so she instantly switches to being happy. She though then notices that Inaba is there, so they go talk about Teichi. Iori says that it's true that she doesn't want to go out with him anymore, but Inaba makes her reveal that this also has to do with the phenomenon. Inaba then tells her to think about it again and to wait until things go back to normal, but Iori asks when will that be, as another phenomenon could just start. She then asks what is the difference between the phenomena Heartseed causes and other external factors, saying that Teichi and her got together after the body swapping began, asking if isn't that just a result of her mind not thinking straight. But she then asks Inaba if she really wants her to go out with Teichi, but then she leaves to class. At noon, Inaba gets thoughts from Yu and Oki as she's giving him a Valentine's chocolate, so she decides to call Teichi over. He arrives and she says that she wants to apologize for what happened yesterday, saying that she just thought he'd tell her if she was going to confess to Iori. But she then gets a thought from Teichi, where he says that he was scared that if he went to Inaba first and lost his nerve, he wouldn't be able to hold himself back, which makes her realize that he was debating between them. Teichi explains that he liked Iori, but that it doesn't mean he doesn't like Inaba, saying that he always thought there wasn't anyone better than her, as he then compliments her qualities. Inaba tells him to stop, but then to continue, though she then tries to say that she didn't mean it. She then hands Teichi a Valentine's chocolate, but she asks him if he still likes Iori. He says that he does, so she asks if he ever thought of her as a consolation prize, but he says he'd never do something that low. Inaba says that there's a lot of things in her own mind right now, but that she's certain she likes him. The next day, Aoki complains to Yu as she also gave Teichi the same chocolate she gave him, but she says that it's mainly a friendship chocolate, though Inaba also ends up pissed at this. But this makes Aoki say to Inaba that she truly likes Teichi, which makes her blush, but then Iori arrives. Later, they plan on how to beat the jazz club. So Inaba proposes to do something effortful that will win over the teachers who see the process as more important than the result and decide that they will make a list of recommended places close to the school. She then asks Iori if it's okay because she's the club president, but she simply says, yeah. So Inaba then says that she's behaving so different now, but Iori asks her if does she have to be the same. And then Oki receives a thought from her, saying that she really can't stand this place and that everyone's hoping for her to play this Iori Nage's character. She then leaves despite Oki trying to stop her by talking nice to her. Later, Oki thinks to himself how he always thought that if he stayed normal, then everyone else would do so as well, but says that he couldn't accomplish anything today. But then he encounters Heartseed, who asks him what does he think he can do about phenomenon. He responds with stay normal, but Heartseed says that that means that he can't do anything about it. But he then asks Aoki what can he do when he can't do anything. But he then receives a thought from Yu, where she wonders what Aoki is doing right now. This makes Aoki think that if Yu thinks about him, then he'll keep fighting, no matter how hard it gets, as these thoughts end up reaching Yu as well. So he tells Heartseed that he'll remain normal for everyone's sake. Heartseed then says that he's truly the most boring and uninteresting out of all of them, and leaves afterwards as Aoki thinks to himself that the 5 of them won't be beaten so easily. Shirayama tries to confess to Iori, but she coldly stops him. But he asks why is her attitude so different from before, saying that she used to be lively, but this makes Iori say that that's the Iori she likes, rather than the current one, and leaves after that. She then thinks to herself that she can't keep this up anymore, saying that her ideals and reality are separating, not even being able to lead a normal life anymore. Later, Satoshi reproaches Iori for turning down Shirayama like that. But they then get into an argument, but as Iori acts disinterested, Satoshi tells her that she's terrible. The next day, Teichi hears as Satoshi is spreading bad rumors about Iori. Mariko tells Iori that the rumors must be something they made up, but Iori tells her to let them spread them as Teichi receives a thought from her saying that it's fine and that it's ok. Iori, though, then receives a thought from Teichi where he says that she's supposed to be more cheerfully and lively, but in turn he receives one from her where she says that they must think she's a liar. At noon, the two of them go together to gather info for the presentation, but then Teichi tells her not to worry if she wants to dump him and says that he'll help her with anything. Iori thanks him, but then Teichi gets a thought from her saying that she doesn't need his help and to stop bothering her, which makes Iori leave on her own. Later, Teichi sits on a bench as he gets a thought from Inaba, where she asks if the club should disband, so at this he meets with her at a cafe. Inaba explains that, as Heartseed observes them as a group, if they disband, he'd stop, though she's not quite sure of it. But she then suggests that they do so for Aori's sake, though Teichi makes her reveal that she doesn't want to disband, as she'd be sad like everyone else. Teichi says that he feels the same, saying that he wants to be with everyone, and with her, though Inaba makes him repeat that last part multiple times to her arousal. They then leave, and Inaba says that if she hadn't barged into their relationship, Aori wouldn't have turned out like that. But Teichi doubts that, saying that he doesn't really understand how Aori feels, and then says that it was his fault that he was dumped. But he then repeats that he was dumped multiple times as a way to yell out the stress, saying that he can't let it drag him down, saying that he has to face it and then go forward. The next day, Yu watches as Iori is hit by Satoshi while running, but she gets a thought from Iori saying not to talk to her. Later, Yu thinks to herself how Iori's always helped her, and that she understands how pained she is right now based on her thoughts, but says that regardless, she doesn't understand her as a friend and can't help her, so she decides to focus on the presentation for now, as it's also for Iori's sake. In the club room, they work on the presentation. Iori then is about to enter, but stops herself and leaves. Yu then stops as she says she felt Iori just came there, so at this, she decides that she'll go see Iori. They later meet up at a cafe, and Yu tells her that it's her turn to help her now, though Iori tells her that she can't do anything. Yu then says that she wants to help her go back to normal, but Iori says that there's no way she can go back, saying that nobody noticed how she really is. And as she says that she's sick of it and that she can't do it anymore, Yu receives a thought from her, where she says that she can't be friends with Yu anymore. Yu tells her that she shall always love her regardless of how much she changes, but Iori asks what if she becomes an entirely different person, so Yu tells her that they have the memories they made until now. Later, Yu calls Inaba from a bus stop, asking her for advice given what happened, but at this, Inaba tells her that she really likes to rely on others. Afterwards, she hangs up, but then Heartseed shows up and sits next to her. Yu gets into a fighting stance, but Heartseed tells her not to, reminding her that he's stronger than her. He then asks Yui what does she think of this phenomenon, asking if isn't she afraid that the insides of her heart are completely exposed. But Yui then tries to send out a thought of help me, which successfully reaches Teichi and Aoki, so they both head to her direction. But she then thinks on Inaba telling her that she relies on others. So she then puts on a fighting stance again and tells Heartseed that she's scared of the phenomena and that she hates it, but that she won't run away anymore, saying that she won't care if her friends find out about her embarrassment. Heartseed then says that he's tired of this, as it doesn't seem like there's any effect no matter what he says, and decides to leave. Teichi arrives to Yu's location, but she says that it's fine now as Heartseed left already. She then tells Teichi that she made the situation with Iori worse, so Teichi says that he did as well. But at this, Yu tells him that Iori must be waiting for him to help her. She then asks why didn't he help Iori in class, so he says that it's because he doesn't know what Iori wants, wondering what to do. But Yu yells at him not to be such an indecisive crybaby, and tells him that if he failed, then to think about how not to fail next time. She then calms down, and Teichi then says to do their best together. The next day, Iori runs into Inaba at school. The latter takes her behind the school and tells her to tell her the entire story. But Iori asks why should she do that? So Inaba says that she wants to save her, as Iori once did to her, and says that friends help each other, telling her to come ask them for help, but Iori tells her not to force her ideals on her. To this, Inaba tells her that she's been acting strange since she dumped Teichi, and then asks if she really had to dump him. But she gets a thought from her, saying to stop forcing that on her, as Iori tells her that she'll speak her mind just like she told her, and tells Inaba that she's too selfish, having tried to force Teichi to be with her. So she followed along, only to then be told that she also liked him, but now having a problem with her not liking him anymore. Then tells Inaba that she doesn't think about what the others think, and that on top of that, she comes along ruining things and asks if she ever thought about how she felt. Inaba tells Teichi what happened, but tells him that Iori was absolutely right. Then she receives a call from Yu, telling her to go to the club room as they need to finish the presentation. Now there, they work on the project as Aoki complains that he'd be studying in order to pass to the next grade, and not be a grade below Yu. As they say they've done a lot of hard work so far, Yu questions if they'll be able to present it with Iori. But then Goto enters their room, who startles them as they thought he was Heartseed. He tells them they've been working hard, and that he'll be cheering for both them and the jazz club, then saying that hard work usually pays off as there's always people who want to help those who work hard. But he then asks where Iori is, and then Teichi receives a thought from her, saying that it's cold today. Later, Teichi and Yu go buy supplies, and Teichi tells her about the thought he received earlier. But as she sees he's sad, she gets him on the back and tells him to not let it get him down. They then agree that they have to finish the presentation for Iori's sake, so she can return to her former self. But as that happens, Thor gets those thoughts in her head and says that no one understands, saying that the emotions they're sending her are too warm and kind for her to bear, and that she doesn't deserve to know how those emotions feel. The next day in the classroom, Inaba and Teichi hear as Satoshi talks poorly about Iori. So at this, Teichi stands up and tells the class that the reason Iori's been acting like this is because she was in love with her, so he forced himself on her and went too far. Iori outside has heard this, and the class is left dumbfounded at this, as Fujishima calls his dad and tells him that there's a criminal in his class. Though she then says that she was just kidding, as Inaba then hits him and takes him outside. He explains that he thought if someone else took the blame for how Iori's changed, the rumors would stop and people might sympathize with her. But Inaba asks if he really had to say that he assaulted her, though he says that he only said that he forced himself. Fujishima then pops up from behind a tree as she's been hearing this, and says that she'll help clear Teichi's name, and that thanks to him, Iori's criticism is going away. Inaba though asks why didn't she do anything before, so she says that it's her duty as class representative to silently wait for all her students to mature, but she's willing to help when necessary. At noon, Satoshi and her friends talk with Iori, asking if she's ready to apologize, but Iori says she has no reason to do so. So they then get mad at her, and then Satoshi tells her to let the jazz club win against them. Iori asks if this is because of Shirayama, so Satoshi gets angry at her, but they then leave, and as they say they plan on teaching Iori a lesson, she hears them and ends up worrying about what might happen. The next day, Teichi, Yui, Inaba, and Oki go to the club room, but find out that it has been vandalized alongside their project. They speculate if it's someone from the jazz band, but they doubt that as they've been working hard as well. Teichi then says that they'll have to start from scratch, but since the presentation is next week, Inaba says that they'll have to throw something simple now, and then says that since they only lost the pretty materials, they'll just have to focus on content and presentation, saying that they haven't lost yet, and that they can't give up for Yori's sake. So at this, they all get fired up and begin cleaning the room. But then, Yori arrives, and shocked at this, Inaba and Teichi receive thoughts from her, where she says that she swears she'll make them regret the moment they decided to bring others into this, saying that she'll make them cry, scream, and make them pay for this, as she runs off. So Teichi and Inaba go after her, as Inaba calls Fujishima and asks her for Satochi's number. They then meet with Satochi, and Inaba tells her that she's in danger. But Yori then arrives and tries to hit her, but is stopped by Inaba and Teichi as they tell Satochi to escape. Yori then drops to the ground and cries, saying that it's all her fault. So Inaba then tells her to have a serious conversation with them. Later, Inaba apologizes to Yori for being too pushy the other day, but she then tells her that she wants her to share her pain with her, and in return she'll give her some of hers. So as she says she'll reveal something embarrassing, she proceeds by saying that she's in love with Teichi, but that it's become so bad she's been dreaming about him, and that the other day, she got a dirty dream with him, but woke up before she got to the good part, which frustrated her, and then shows her how they were positioned in the dream with a drawing, then saying that since she was in the mood, she thought about Teichi while, only for Teichi to stop her as he gets a thought from her where she says that she's so embarrassed and that she's about to cry. She then tells Yori that she was right on, that she's selfish, saying that she couldn't help falling in love with Teichi after having tried to get them both together, then saying that she wouldn't have accepted this conclusion before, as she used to rationalize everything she did. So she then tells Yori to complain as well, but Yori instead says that she's had enough of this crap and calls her an idiot, saying that if she now breaks down and apologizes, it'll surely make for an emotional ending, but that it's not going to work that way, saying that she's done playing the tragic heroine, asking when will it all end, what the hell is Heartsea, and how does he do all this, saying that none of this makes sense, and that she can't take any more suffering. They realize she's been stressed out, so Inaba tells her that they can help her get back to normal, but Yori says that they've got it all wrong, sending them thoughts where she asks who they want her to be, and that she can't do this. So Teichi tells her that her usual self is happy and loved, but Yori says that she can't be the person everyone wants her to be anymore, and then reveals that she's actually a pretty gloomy person, but pretended to be cheerful, as everyone seemed to like it better that way, and that it was more fun for her too, but says that she's tired of pretending, saying that Heartsea pushed her to her limits after everything that's happened, and that it was hard to reject his offer to redo her life, saying that she can't keep trying too hard all the time, now having to deal with the thoughts phenomenon, having to live in fear that she'll get called a liar because she's a different person on the inside, and that she ended up panicking and losing control as she didn't know what to do. Inaba calls her an idiot, as she called her that first, and says that that's not their problem. She admits that they might have been pressuring her to meet their expectations, but says that she's the one who pushed herself to meet those expectations, saying that it was stupid, and that she doesn't have to bottle it all up, then telling her that it's her own life and to live the way she wants. Teichi then tells Yori that it makes sense that he rejected him as he didn't see who she truly was, but then says that now he thinks he can get through the real Yori, and says that he still loves her, saying that it doesn't matter that she isn't the person he thought she was, and that all he needs and matters is that he still considers her as his friend. Yori then asks for some time to think. Later, Inaba walks alone feeling down due to what Teichi said to Yori, but then she runs into some boys and hears as they talk about how they thrashed the Student Cultural Society room. So at this, she tries to attack them, but they hold her, so she thinks of help, which reaches all her friends. Inaba is now retained at a warehouse as one of the boys calls Satochi over. As Inaba realizes they couldn't have taken her far away, Inaba sends a thought where she says that she's in the abandoned warehouse near the school. His friends receive it and go after her, though Yori chooses to remain in her bed. She debates with herself that Inaba is in danger, but that she doesn't know what to do, saying that she's a terrible person for doing nothing, but then gets thoughts from Yu, Teichi, and Oki at Scream were coming to help. Yori then thinks on Inaba telling her to live her own life, and on Teichi saying that he still loves her. She then thinks to herself that she doesn't have to be perfect, nor meet everyone's expectations, as there are people who accept her for who she is, saying that life isn't about doing everything right, but about doing what you want to do and being whom you want to be. And as she gets more thoughts from her friends of saving Inaba, she says that she'll follow her heart, and that Erorinagaze will be Yorinagaze, asking herself what she wants to do, then answering with being free as she goes help Inaba. Back in the warehouse, Teichi, Oki, and Yui have arrived and watch as the boys blame Satochi for this situation, as she was the one told them to destroy their project, but as she says she did so because everyone said to do it, one of them slaps her, telling her not to try to blame others. Inaba looks angrily at him, so he gets mad, but this makes Teichi, Oki, and Yui enter and tell them to stop. Yori then reaches the warehouse, but stares from outside a window. Teichi and Oki and punch one of them, as Yu then soundly beats the rest of them. But then they notice one of them is holding a knife at Inaba's throat and tells them to stay back. But then, Iori enters the warehouse and tells the guy that she has a grudge to settle with his classmates, saying that she'll side with him. But as she says that, she thinks to herself that she hopes this works. The guy buys her lie and drops his guard, and as she approaches him, she sends a thought to her friends telling them to grab Inaba now. So Yu rushes and elbows him, taking him down, and they then free Inaba. Iori then falls to the ground, saying that she was so scared, and that she's had enough of this crap as she cries as Yu then hugs her. After that, they escape with Satoshi, and later, she explains to them that she has a crush on Shirayama, so she got mad at Iori for rejecting him and began messing with her. She then says that she wasn't going to do anything to the club room, but ended up pressured into doing so, though says that it's just an excuse and apologizes. At this, Iori smiles and says that she's made up her mind, then hits Satoshi on her face, but then apologizes and helps her back up, though Satoshi then repeatedly apologizes. Iori, though, says that all this was partly her fault and says that they're even, then asks Satoshi to forgive her. She then tells Satoshi that she's actually a nice girl and asks why has she been acting like she's bad, so she says that she was trying to match the boy she used to like. At this, Iori says that they're very similar and asks her what does she want to do, to which Satoshi responds that she wants to join a club, the student council, and ask Shirayama out, so Iori tells her to do those things instead of taking it on others when things don't go her way. Though she then says that she shouldn't be lecturing her on that as she did the exact same thing. She then asks her to be friends as she then says that Iori Nagase is back in action. Walking back with her friends, Iori thinks on how she was always trying to be what someone else wanted, but realizes that that was wrong as there are people who accept her for who she is. Then thinking it's your own life, so live it the way you want. But then one of the boys from the warehouse shows up holding a pipe and tries to hit Inaba with it, but Teichi gets in the way and receives the impact himself. In the morning, Teichi then finds himself talking with Iori through the thought phenomenon. They both say that they were truly in love, but that it was an immature one as Teichi only saw what she wanted him to see. Though Iori says that she's still really happy that he fell in love with him, saying that her feelings were real, but she made mistakes, as there was a lot she didn't understand. So she then asks to reset their relationship, apologizing for being selfish. But Teichi says that he was just as selfish, saying that he was kind of in love for the sake of love. They then tell each other they're glad they fell in love with each other. And then Teichi wakes up in the school infirmary and sees Inaba, who's glad that he woke up. She explains that the guy got away, so they carried him there as it was closer than a hospital. Teichi says that he's fine and apologizes for making her worry. But Inaba then says that she doesn't know what she'd do if anything happens to him, as then multiple thoughts hit Teichi's head from her, where she says that she needs him, as she's so in love with him, which makes her embarrassed. But Teichi then asks her if she wants to go out with him, which makes her scream, so she asks him if he finds her cute, which he says that he does, but then screams again as she asks why does she ask that, but then calms herself down and says sure. Meanwhile, Heartseed approaches Iori, who tells her that he'll stop the phenomenon and that he thought she'd be the one to tell them. But Iori asks if he was intentionally choosing the worst emotions to transmit to everyone, as he said it happened at random, but the timing was too perfect, and says that he was trying to make her hate herself. But Heartseed says that that's something she'll have to decide for herself, though he says that it feels like a turning point of sorts for her. He then says that he never expected to become so acquainted with them, and then leaves. The next day, Satoshi shows up at school with a new haircut and is now friends with Iori. Sometime later, the STUSES members show their project at the presentation. Iori shows the school a cafe that's perfect for dates, as Yu says that the two members who checked it out are now a couple, then asking Teichi and Inaba if she's right. But this makes them accidentally reveal that they're a couple to the entire school now, as everyone laughs and cheers at this. Afterwards, Goto congratulates them for their hard work and says that he'll be their advisor, though he then reveals that after some thinking he can also serve as the jazz club's advisor by helping them when he's free. But as they realize this was always an option, Inaba holds Goto's arm in anger as the girls cheer for her. Afterwards, Teichi narrates that they were able to survive another ordeal, then explaining that Aoki had to take makeup exams, but that Yu helped him study, saying that they've been growing closer little by little, and that he and Inaba are dating now. Then explains that Iori is now popular again, and that she gets along great with Satoshi, and that the guys who thrashed their room were dealt with by Fujishima's dad, saying that they'll never lay a finger on him again. The next school year, the STUSES members talk about how they might get new members for the club, and that they also have to deal with strange phenomena, though they say that Heartseed hasn't shown up again, but they have to stay vigilant. Iori then says that they never know what may happen in life, but that if they believe in the path they take, that path becomes part of who they are, then saying to enjoy every day to the fullest. And as they walk together, Teichi narrates that he's sure they'll get lost or run into obstacles in their life, but that they'll continue to walk on the path they've chosen, connecting their hearts in the process.